Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
Ethically, that's a big topic in itself, the ethical responsibilities. I do know that the European Union did come up with the AI Act, and now, the firms are supposed to categorize those applications according to how much beneficial it is for human beings and all that and everything. And, opportunities, challenges, it's like a two-edged sword. With advancements, there will always be opportunities and challenges. And it's always about, how do we adopt the good sides and we adopt it into our audit practices? That's all that matters, right? Well, and also, there was somebody that told me, I think it was one of the big fours, I'm not able to remember. I think they also thought about integrating AI and putting everything on the blockchain and using blockchain as a self-auditing mechanism or something like that. Well, I mean, do you know what that was? Or
That's very forward thinking. I haven't seen exactly that specific instance. I did see the firm Armanino actually do some publicly available on-demand audits, or they were actually agreed upon procedures, right? An attestation engagement nonetheless of blockchain assets, right? So there was a couple of exchanges that were their clients, and you could on demand yourself pull up a web browser and say, I want to know as of such and such date exactly how much of this digital asset the firm had in its custody. And you could enter that and it would go ahead and produce the agreed upon procedure report with the procedures actually performed in there, the letter, everything in there, like that was on demand that could be produced. I thought that was extraordinarily innovative.
welcome to another interesting episode of our podcast. I'm Saul and I'm your host. And today we are joined by Rob Valdez, a trailblazer in integrating a technology with audit practices. Rob, it's great to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you about a topic that I'm very passionate about.
Absolutely, absolutely. The topic for today is how AI is transforming and disrupting audit. Rob's expertise in leveraging AI for enhancing audit efficiency and managing risk has set new benchmarks in the industry. Today, he'll shed some light on how AI is reshaping the audit landscape. Rob, could you start off with a brief overview of your journey into the technology-driven auditing?
Yes, happy to do so. So originally, I came into this profession from industry and then ended up going and get my master's in accounting and license and going into public accounting and doing financial statement audits. But I had some experience in the past working for a software developer. So when I was doing financial statement audits, they noticed very quickly that I could speak tech to the IT teams. And so they kept putting me on that component of the financial statement audit. And it made me very interested in this field. And I thought cybersecurity was very interesting. So I started doing more SOC audits, got more specialized in that, ended up getting a CISA certification, the Certified Information Systems Auditor, and then dedicated to IT audit after that, and ended up starting an automation practice and starting a digital advisory and getting to do a lot of fun things as a result of that open-mindedness and experimentation.
Oh yeah, I mean, sounds exciting. I mean, this is really interesting. The learning curve that you had, that natural understanding of the systems and, how you integrated it with your passion. It's amazing, and the times right now that we are in, and the topic that we're talking about, AI, which is often seen as a buzzword lately, its application in auditing is genuinely transformative, no doubt about it. There's a lot of talk about it. So Rob, can you explain what is AI for our users and its growing importance in the accounting profession?
Yeah, happy to do so. And This is such a timely topic, so great thing to talk about. And it's nice to start off setting the table and kind of establishing some terminology about what we're discussing here. So today, a lot of times when people say AI, they mean large language models, which is awesome. And it's incredible because since November of 2022, OpenAI released their latest version of their product, ChatGPT, and it really caught everybody's attention. And so now we're very much interested in artificial intelligence. But it has, of course, a long history even before that. And it's been developed even since the 50s. And AI is any kind of technology and system that simulates learning and or intelligence. And there's been a lot of versions of that along the way, and they've gotten much more improved, and it always involves some kinds of statistics and mathematics along with the technology to do this kind of simulation of learning and intelligence. But now, since we can speak plain language to it, whether it's English or your language of choice, we seem to feel a lot more comfortable calling this AI at this point in time. And that means that even though accountants have been using different forms of this technology over time, we're now even more excited, even more inspired to continue finding ways to adopt and apply this technology in our profession. And since accountants deal with a ton of data and transformation of data and reporting of data, we obviously need to interpret and apply our intelligence to this data in order to communicate with stakeholders, and now leveraging artificial intelligence to do exactly this and help us is just very exciting and very important for the entire profession.
Yeah, and you mentioned, something called large language models. I mean, these are terminologies, right? And a lot of people kind of really don't have an idea about it. I think there's also natural language processing involved into it. I mean, there's so many terms, but today when somebody talks about artificial intelligence, I guess ChatGPT has taken up the world by storm to such an extent that it's kind of like the power of branding, right? Like Xerox did it, what it was doing is photocopying, but we stopped using the word photocopying and we started using Xerox as a verb. Like WhatsApp does it, that you're no longer saying text me on WhatsApp, you're like just WhatsApp it to me. So like now chat GPT is kind of like become like a verb, it's just chat GPT it or something like that. It's so funny. But following up on that, with your experience, how would you say, how are the AI technologies reshaping the traditional audit methods that we have?
Yeah, so the lucky thing about our profession over time is that as companies have adopted additional technology and they've increasingly digitized their accounting records and digitized their record-keeping systems, it's opening the door for us to access more of this data in its native digital form, and then also apply these technologies like artificial intelligence to this data. So really, digital transformation over the past 20 years has kind of made it more available and accessible to us to now be able to say, okay, if we can ingest and process all this information in using our different audit platforms, using the client's different general ledger package, ERP system, and we can access that natively in its digital form, maybe now we can do even more intuitive, natural language-based data mining, natural language-based audit procedures, and as a result of that, suddenly get a lot of exciting applications. There's Trulion, that is a platform that is designed to have a bunch of audit procedures kind of built into it. MindBridge is an example of a platform that helps auditors kind of do, whether it's journal entry testing or large data analysis. There's platforms like Uplink that are available where you kind of make these audit requests to your client, and then they go ahead and provide you back the responses. And in this platform specifically, you can actually write in plain English your audit procedure, the thing that you're going to perform. Please identify the amount of these sales invoices. And then as the client uploads the artifacts, whether it's like PDFs or whatever type of file, the artificial intelligence, the large language model, will go ahead and kind of OCR or look for the characters on the page of this PDF and then process that and use its reasoning engine to say, okay, let's go ahead and find the date of the invoice, the customer, the amount, and try and see if this matches to what's expected. And that, of course, is very exciting because we can spend more of our energy, focus, time, and effort on actually interpreting the results of the test and thinking about risk, as opposed to just spending all of our hard effort and mental energy doing one test at a time and spending all of our time that way. So it's kind of, we hope, going to continue shifting our focus to the more important intellectual part of the job and a little bit less ticking and tying, right?
Well, that is so interesting. I wish this was there, like 15 years earlier. I'll tell you what, when I started my job with a stockbroking firm, I was part of the audit department, and I used to do concurrent audits. And in the stockbroking firm, there are a lot of transactions happening every day, and you're auditing that to ensure that it's accounted properly and everything. And I wish, back then it was all paper-based. I wish this was there. I would have just like loaded it all and, like it would do all the vouchings and everything and verify it with the supporting documents, and it's so much better. I mean, but anywho, I mean, it's well, better late than never, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yes.
so, and the thing is, there are a lot of people who are just so scared of AI, or maybe they just, I wouldn't say scared. I think they just have misconceptions. So, and you must have heard them too, because, you're talking about it, and there are people who are like, no, this is not, it's a job killer. God knows what's not. So what are, in your own experience, what are some misconceptions about AI in audit that you have encountered?
Yeah, I do encounter this type of discussion a lot, right? On a couple of different aspects. There's one that, okay, AI is going to replace the accountant, right? That's kind of a little bit extreme, but replace the auditor, and now the software will do the work, and so the auditor will no longer be necessary. Another example is that, well, if we become overly reliant upon artificial intelligence, we'll have no good way of training new staff to do the work, since we'll just kind of focus on the higher level review and that sort of thing. And another example that I hear is that if artificial intelligence comes in and is more powerful, then maybe we'll accidentally miss kind of some information and give a wrong audit opinion and that sort of thing. And then finally, information security is, of course, I wouldn't necessarily call that a misconception. That is the right type of thing to be concerned about, but there traditionally are a lot of things we can do to protect our information along the way, right? So I guess if we take a couple of those things and kind of dig into them a little bit as much as you want to, I certainly have a strong belief that AI will not replace the auditor. Instead, it will actually increase the demand for accounting services and accountants. And I have a whole long theory and explanation of why this is, but you could kind of just boil the whole thing down to a pretty simple idea. And that is, if we can perform more activities, then obviously people start asking us to do more activities in different areas, different parts of the business. And as a result of us being asked to do more and more parts of the business, those are more valuable types of services, which requires more expertise, which means we need more accountants to be able to oversee those types. And then since we say, okay, well, we need more accountants, then let's invest even more in technology. And it creates a nice virtuous cycle, a sort of self-building kind of process that really ends up benefiting those who become the users of artificial intelligence, in my opinion. That's what I'm imagining can happen.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of My CPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you said it right. It's like it's helping each other. Each function is helping the other, and the ball keeps on moving forward and just keeps on increasing. Kind of like a you're kind of like saying like a Fibonacci sequence, and it's kind of this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, a nice mathematical formula there, right? That builds upon
Yeah.
itself,
It
a
builds up.
feedback loop of
Yeah,
sorts, right? Some
yeah,
people have different words for this: snowball effect, the flywheel effect, a
yeah.
lot of different ideas that communicate this. And there is good research that actually supports this idea. It's not just my own harebrained scheme. Going all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, as certain types of technologies became cheaper, we ended up consuming more of them, and it's called Jevons paradox. It's a very interesting idea that anybody who wants can go look up and read all of the literature that's around this concept, and it's fascinating stuff that I think is important for accountants like us and advisors and professionals to be aware of.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I mean, this is really interesting. I would love to keep on talking on that, but I would not want to derail from our main topic. So, but let's dive into the practical side of things. You already mentioned some examples, but could you just provide them again, like some AI-driven technologies that are used in audit today, and something that you see day in, day out, that you feel that there will be like game changers in the near future,
Absolutely. So let's start with something that's been around for like a longer time, and then move forward to something that's more new and more recently available, right? So I mentioned a couple of companies. One of those was MindBridge. I have no relationship to them whatsoever, and this company has been helping auditors perform analysis of transaction ledgers, like let's say a general ledger, for many years, to do things like journal entry testing. And they use machine learning, right, which is the combination of programming and statistics brought together, and kind of to identify some patterns and look for outliers in patterns, right? So we auditors already do this. We do it manually. We say, let's take all the journal entries that were performed during a period, and let's look for unusually large amounts or unnatural balances, right? Debits and the credits, credits and the debits. Let's look for any big round numbers. Let's look for any descriptions for the journal entry memo that are unanticipated, right? And they can automate those types of procedures and tease out additional types of statistical patterns that would be a little bit harder for the auditor to manually go through and calculate every single one of those. So that's machine learning. It's been applied. It continues to be applied. That product becomes more and more popular over time. And then I mentioned another one, kind of hinted at it, and that is Uplink is an example of that document request platform. And so we said that we can write a test, and then the AI engine will attempt to perform the test. Let's dig into that just a tiny bit, right? So let's say that a very common thing we might ask for is a policy, an example of a policy, right? An information security policy, since we're talking about cybersecurity and InfoSec, right? So we may say that the organization has a control activity that they want to review and approve this policy on an annual basis. And then perhaps there's a lot of things that we test inside of that policy to make sure that they're accurate and properly stated. But for example, we can go in and write the test that we are going to look for a review and approval within the audit period, right? Let's pretend we're auditing 2023. So in the year 2023, was this renewally reviewed and approved by the, and then just say information security officer, right? And the AI engine will go ahead and parse, actually read all the words of that document, look for the last approval date, determine whether that approval date falls within the range, and then respond back the answer that says, hopefully, yes, this was reviewed and approved within 2023. And then in the more exciting scenarios, the engine can actually go ahead and also produce a very rough draft of a work paper. So an Excel file that says, here's the test that was attempted to be performed. Here's all the items that are selected to perform that test against. Here's the attribute that was identified, yes or no. And then, of course, an auditor, a human being, has to review and sign that off. That's still within our generally accepted auditing standards. Is still probably within all firm policies. So that kind of speaks to that other item that we talked about, that something important could be missed, of course, some humans still has to review all these things. And I can't imagine there are any firms at this moment in time who would not agree 100% with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I even heard somebody say that, with the data that is available to AI and the ease through which it is able to sift through the data and give you that, it's not only able to give you the results, but it's also able to analyze the data and interpret it for you and give you suggestions based on it, because it's got this, it's able to develop that understanding on its own of what should be and what should have been. So it's able to, like help you with that data analysis and interpretation as well, especially during, I guess, compilation and review engagements, because that's why you need to do a lot of analysis, ensure everything follows through. So that's one angle of AI. I mean, and then the other angle that you talked about, that it's helping to enhance the efficiency or the accuracy and the risk management, but, but it's still, risk management is a little bit difficult, because at the end of the day, AI is actually analyzing things based on what is given to it.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've had instances in the past wherein the documents itself were fabricated. And because of that, that becomes difficult. So I guess that's why, like we humans need to be always there in the line to ensure that what we are feeding it is correct, so I completely agree with you there, So, and, with you talking to so many people, are there any specific industries where the impact of AI is like more pronounced? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you tell me.
Yeah. So right now, of course, the industries that have the largest access to the most data have been using machine learning for a long time. And so since they have been using machine learning, they already kind of have policies in place to describe how artificial intelligence should be relied upon and how it also should be governed and controlled as well. So they almost have a step up on some of the rest of the broader industries. And perhaps one of the most famous examples of this is financial services, right? Banking and financial services have been for decades really been building very nice models, have been using Python programmers as part of their shops. They've been doing, high volume programmatic trading. And so they are a little bit more used to consuming and analyzing large data sets. And as a result of that, they kind of have some of those embedded skill sets built into their teams. And that's very exciting because it means that they're ready to go and they kind of know model governance, model risk, all of these things that have to be thought about. And so they're probably the ones who are moving the fastest in this type of area, although clearly there are other types of industries which are extremely interested in this. But in terms of accounting and auditing in financial services, they really appear to be moving at a different pace than some of the other industries.
Yes. And I guess a lot of it has to do with the training, like you mentioned, banks, they've already been following through and they've been kind of using this data and they've been analyzing it and they've been using this protocols in place to automate and give them information, interpret data and give them information. But then, now with the advent of, all these platforms that you talked about that's coming, do you feel that, there are challenges for the firms? I mean, the challenges that the firms face when, like for training the AI systems for audit purposes, what challenges do you think the firms face in training the AI system for audit purposes?
Yeah, so I actually find the challenges around adoption of artificial intelligence to be surprisingly similar to the challenges that different firms have faced when adopting digital transformation in general, right? And that includes things like moving to the cloud and using cloud-based applications and using cloud-based collaboration tools, which thankfully we all got kind of compelled to do during COVID. A horrible tragedy became something that we could use to our advantage. But as a result of that, we're getting better at adopting these types of technologies, but we haven't necessarily become really, really excellent at adopting these types of technology. So what do I mean, right? So the governance, surprisingly, the process of analyzing the risk, establishing the use cases, establishing policies, making decisions, routing these decisions to the proper channels of decision making, and then communicating those things to the entire enterprise, to the entire firm. That is all kind of very human-based processes that are indeed very complex and challenging for any organization. And they're proving once again to be challenging here, right? Because you say, okay, we think we want to use, let's just throw out ChatGPT, right? Since that's the one that everybody says. We think we want to use ChatGPT, and everybody looks at each other and says, well, who makes that decision? Who says that that's okay? Who decides what can and cannot be put into this? And you kind of saw this play out in that in 2022, as soon as ChatGPT was released, organizations, enterprises, even some forward-thinking accounting firms said, we think we might want to have our employees use this in certain instances, and we want to be able to provide it to them. But how shall we do this? How shall we control this? How can we make sure that people aren't putting in certain information? How do we provision users in your platform? And OpenAI didn't even have an enterprise subscription back at that time. They didn't have an enterprise subscription with all the tool sets that are absolutely necessary for deploying enterprise software. So they didn't have it. We didn't know how to adopt it. And the whole thing kind of stumbled through its discovery of good governance practices once again, and decision-making and adoption. And we're still finding our way through that. But now we're actually seeing some firms very publicly announcing that they are doing some good job of adopting this thing, right? So askmarkham.ai is a platform that was publicly disclosed by Markham, and BDO Personas is a platform that is publicly disclosed by BDO. And the Big Four have publicly talked about their different projects for adopting large language models and for rolling them out for client uses as well. So we are seeing this happen throughout the profession. We're just seeing it kind of happening in different ways at different places. And it's still presenting some challenges for us to figure out exactly how to adopt it safely, securely, responsibly, ethically, all those things which we definitely wanted to do.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE's Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Well, ethically, that's a big topic in itself, the ethical responsibilities. I do know that the European Union did come up with the AI Act, and now, the firms are supposed to categorize those applications according to how much beneficial it is for human beings and all that and everything. And, opportunities, challenges, it's like a two-edged sword. With advancements, there will always be opportunities and challenges. And it's always about, how do we adopt the good sides and we adopt it into our audit practices? That's all that matters, right? Well, and also, there was somebody that told me, I think it was one of the Big Fours, I'm not able to remember. I think they also thought about integrating AI and putting everything on the blockchain and using blockchain as a self-auditing mechanism or something like that. Well, I mean, do you know what that was? Or
That's very forward thinking. I haven't seen exactly that specific instance. I did see the firm Armanino actually do some publicly available on-demand audits, or they were actually agreed upon procedures, right? An attestation engagement nonetheless of blockchain assets, right? So there was a couple of exchanges that were their clients, and you could on demand yourself pull up a web browser and say, I want to know as of such and such date exactly how much of this digital asset the firm had in its custody. And you could enter that, and it would go ahead and produce the agreed upon procedure report with the procedures actually performed in there, the letter, everything in there, like that was on demand that could be produced. I thought that was extraordinarily innovative. I don't know exactly how much that's being relied upon in the field yet, because it's still a little bit early for those types of things. And unfortunately, with FTX, there was just horrible fraud and fallout from these types of activities. And we can now drop the word alleged, right? Sam Bankman-Fried has been prosecuted. He has been found guilty. So we don't have to say alleged. This is something that the finder of fact determined was indeed fraud. And so, there has been fits and starts in the cryptocurrency space, and intersections with artificial intelligence will be very interesting to watch happen over time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you brought up a very interesting point, when you mentioned FTX, because there are two schools of thought. There is a school of thought that is saying that AI can also be used to commit fraud. And there is a school of thought that is saying that AI can aid in combating fraud and financial misstatements and all those kind of things. But, we want to talk on the good side, right? So I would want to know from you, how can AI aid in combating fraud and financial misstatements?
Yes, absolutely. So just like every technology, it is a tool, and every tool can be used by the person who holds the tool for the objective that they wish to accomplish, right? So unfortunately, people who wish to commit, illicit actions are going to explore and find ways to do that. And people who wish to use artificial intelligence to defend against those types of things, thankfully, will also do that, right? So a couple of really interesting applications that have been improving much, much more over time, right? So we talked about the ability to read and consume through natural language processing different large types of documents, right? And so whereas we used to take a sample of a client's lease contracts and test specific items in the lease contracts, and maybe if it's let's just say a hospital system, right? They're going to have thousands and possibly tens of thousands of lease agreements that need to be tested in different levels of materiality. And so, we used to say, okay, we're going to have to sample these and then extrapolate the results of our testing over a statistical sample to determine, whether or not we think there's a material misstatement here or not, or a deviation of control or not. And now the opportunity is to, instead of just test a sample, test the entire population, right? And actually go and look for all those types of items. And where this might end up finding fraud in some instances is that there can be those sort of needles in the haystack cases that kind of hide in those larger populations. And if a human might have a really difficult time identifying a pattern across a bunch of those types of things, like let's say a pattern in related party activity that would be very difficult to identify otherwise, maybe now with that broader coverage, we can actually reduce our detection risk and ultimately find instances of fraud that we otherwise may not have ever found.
Interesting. Very, very interesting, And you rightly said, because in audit, sampling is one of the most critical, activities, how you're determining the sample and what is the sample size, and based on that, and there's also the risk appetite element involved, and based on that, you're determining the sample size. And sometimes, things get across because either you don't see it as much material, because hey, at the end of the day, it's a human being interpreting. I don't think it's that much material to be taken into consideration. Or sometimes the sample size that you've chosen, it just happens to be that lucky one,
That's right.
Yeah, but AI, that you rightly said, AI allows you to leverage onto everything. Like you don't need to worry about a sample. You could actually have it sift through everything and find those little cracks in the wall and everything and get that going, Very, very interesting. Very rightly said, very rightly said. But with adopting everything, with everybody, like trying to feel that, oh, I could probably, like have AI do it to me while I could be sipping on my pina coladas on a vacation somewhere. Or whatnot. But then there is also the ethical considerations that come into play. You don't want to become too reliant into it. There are some ethical considerations that you as an individual always need to adopt while you are using AI, especially in a process called audit, right? But I would love to know from you, because you have got more experience, if I were to ask you what ethical considerations should be kept in mind with AI in audit, What would you say?
Yeah, so there's a lot to keep in mind in terms of ethics, and we've seen already in this type of technology, we've seen some interesting challenges pop up in several different formats, right? We even saw a attorney who was using ChatGPT to help him write some motions for the court, and it was citing cases that didn't even exist. And unfortunately, this person chose not to go ahead and review and double check that everything indeed existed, submitted that to the court. It was discovered that these were non-existing cases. And so that professional responsibility and that due care that is embedded in our generally accepted auditing standards is, of course, a primary foundation that we have to always consider no matter what. And hopefully we won't see a lot of instances of people just kind of coasting through and letting the AI take care of what they wish to be their job. But even with that sort of fundamental standard of professional care met, there are other challenges that come into play when it comes to artificial intelligence. And that is just like other applications of technology and computer systems, garbage in means garbage out, right? And so in the terms of artificial intelligence, this means training data, whatever this data that was used to train the model, and maybe a large language model, maybe a machine learning model, whatever. If there are different types of problematic observations or biases in there, then we're going to actually get problematic conclusions and biases come out of the model. So let's speak a little bit less abstract and talk about some specific examples. So it famously was published, maybe nefariously was published, that Apple had released some financial products, right? Some credit cards, and this has been disclosed in the news and that kind of thing. So it's something that we know now very well, and we can learn this lesson from. And that is that they were looking to whom they should provide credit. How much credit should they provide for these credit cards? And they trained the financial model on a large data set of actual existing credit histories, existing credit applications, existing credit approvals, etc. And it just so happens that the training set that they used in the society that we live in where they used it, it happens that women earn less income, and therefore, as a result of that, were approved for credit less often and were approved for smaller credit limits. And so that's the model that got trained. So now the machine, the artificial intelligence, started making determinations that women should be approved for credit less often, approved for smaller limits. And when this was observed in the actual outputs of the model over time through some very good investigative journalism and consumer reporting, it was very embarrassing for Apple to realize that this had been the case and to admit that this is something that they did not want to be a part of their financial product and service offering, and go back and put in place better model governance procedures to determine which data should be used in that training set, to identify the conclusions that are being produced by that model, and to make sure that that's the appropriate use that they feel is appropriate with their objectives and their company values and their strategic long-term plan. So if we're thinking about auditors doing this type of thing, then we need to have better understanding of the training processes for our models. How can this be especially complicated and challenging right now? Well, there's a lot of conversation about the term open AI originally being open source in terms of what actually got used in the model, the model's weights, and the governance processes around the model. That's kind of what was initially conceived back in 2015 and 2016. However, subsequent to that, they made some decisions around their company and organizational strategy that they were going to close some of the transparency in this model. And as a result of that, with that one specific instance, we don't have all the information about the training data sets, the weights, the decision, and the governance processes that exist around these conclusions and outputs, which means that there could be, and very likely are, a lot of biases and conclusions that maybe certain organizations might not necessarily be comfortable with. And we're witnessing kind of this discussion play out in real time. How shall that be handled? How shall that be used? And of course, auditors would be no exception to being subject to these types of biases and these types of outcomes over the long run.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, very interesting. That Apple case, I mean, like I was also following that closely because I also talk with a lot of women leaders, and it didn't turn out well for a lot of people, but hey, it was a good lesson in disguise. It did set a good foundation that, you can't become too much. It's too early to become reliant on it. You want to be cognizant and you continuously want, and eventually that's exactly what AI should be. Something to make your job easier, something to make you more efficient, but nothing that makes you feel that, oh, now it can do it, I don't need to do it. Because it's as good as saying that, it can replace you, but we never want that to happen.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so rather we're like, okay, it's making my job easier. Let's just focus on that. All right.
We still
Well,
need to use our intelligence in the process, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Well, this is where we stand. This is where we stand. A very beautiful. We are at a very beautiful place. Artificial intelligence shaping the lives of our future. And then now let's, I just wanted to know your perspective towards the future. When we look towards the future, how do you see AI-driven technologies evolving in the audit sector? What's your dream? What do you really want it to achieve?
Yeah, boy, do I have a long wish list in terms of the dreams, but maybe I'll share just a couple of them, and you can let me know what sounds interesting to you, right? So there's a couple of things I talked about, the adoption of technology and governance decisions around those things, and even the migration of to the cloud and adoption of cloud technologies. Well, as we've continued, as our profession has continued in its long process of digital transformation and adoption of these types of technologies, we've gotten better about digitizing many records, and that's wonderful, but we still are challenged with data silos. And that means that a lot of times, even one application which is totally digitized is entirely separate from another application and another application and another application. And of course, APIs and middleware and all different types of platforms can help us bridge many of these gaps, but nonetheless, the gaps still exist and they're pervasive, right? You ask your client for a trial balance and they go into their software and they download the trial balance as of the date that you need it, and then they upload it into your records request repository, and then you download it from that records request repository and upload that into your document management system. And so we're jumping from one data silo to the next, and somebody's laptop or somebody's desktop or somebody else's computer is acting as a lily pad for all of those hops along the way. So we're still siloed, unfortunately, quite a bit, and we're doing much better, but we still have tons of benefit and gain to be achieved in this area. So I'm actually hoping that our continued value that we find through adopting artificial intelligence, through adopting these platforms, ends up integrating more and more of these systems with better and better integrations across different platforms, so that even when APIs are available, that's wonderful. Let's help translate the data sets and structures from one area to the next, right? If we want to get real technical, right? Let's make sure that the schema can be translated from one system into another system so that all the rows and columns actually are labeled correctly and the different tables have the relationships established correctly so that we can audit the client's records in the way that we want to. So that would be very, very high on my wish list. And I would hope that if the auditor continues to adopt more technology and the auditee continues to adopt more technology, then at some point in the future, these start overlapping even more and more, and we start to get more of that continuous assurance that we've been dreaming about for so long, additional value add, get out of the data silos and a little bit more into maybe a data lake, perhaps, and be able to play together in that type of area. So that's certainly something I would be thrilled to see.
Well, I would be thrilled to see too, because, I'm just thinking, I mean, it's a little bit of a funny thought that came into my mind while you were saying this, that, we got these data silos, and now, we eventually reach to the stage wherein all the data is merged into one place and everybody's sipping through that because it's the same data and it's sipping through it. But, God forbid, it's intelligence in itself. And God forbid if this intelligence were to grow to a point wherein it starts to develop disorders similar to what we humans have. Like, what if ChatGPT came through a OCD, an obsessive compulsive disorder, and now it's become so hungry for the data to be so perfect?
It raises a really interesting question, right? That we started this conversation saying, what is artificial intelligence? And it's like, well, it's really any system or technology that simulates intelligence and learning, which means that we established ourselves as the benchmark ideal of perfection, as the objective. And that's a very interesting thing for us to do, because we know that humans have all different types of challenges and complexities, and sometimes lack of ethics, and even we mentioned fraud in this conversation. And so if we design systems to learn from us and be more like us, then doesn't that mean that we're going to train them to do some of the things that we don't like about our behavior? And
Yes.
and that's a whole can of worms right there, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I'm glad that you said that. And AI is a big thing, but in your experience, do you see any other emerging technologies that you believe would be transforming audit in the coming years?
Yes. So you did mention already a couple of interesting areas, right? We talked about blockchain technology. So that's something that people have been dreaming about, whether or not will have an impact or not, and to what degree it will have or not. And so far, we witnessed that the most prominent area where this is having an impact is, of course, cryptocurrency. And among those cryptocurrencies, the most prominent of all that has really established a foothold in terms of entities that we audit, publicly traded, publicly registered companies, is, of course, Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin is actually being held on the balance sheets of SEC registrants right now. We can throw out the name MicroStrategy. Absolutely. It's almost become a Bitcoin trust. We could talk about Tesla. Of course, they've had and sometimes bought and sold Bitcoin on their balance sheet from time to time. Block is the technology company. And then, of course, all the miners, the miner entities have this on their balance sheet. And this is a fascinating technology for us as accountants to be involved in auditing and observing. I've audited companies that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and there's a surprising amount of easy to access records of all of the transactions that they have for all of the wallet addresses that they have in their entire custody, right? So you can go through and see every single transaction back to inception that has been performed for this entity, and then trace it all the way to where it is right now. You can query the public blockchain. You can use multiple different blockchain explorers to do it, and prove to yourself that this is something that they had in balance at a certain wallet on a certain date and time. And you can also prove control in a couple of different ways. You can have them sign a transaction with a cryptographic key that actually publishes something on that public register that proves that they can control the wallet. Or an even simpler version is simply say arbitrarily on December 31st of the audit year, call them up and say, you know what, go ahead and just move exactly this amount right now from this wallet to that wallet, and then move it back, or just leave it if it's both your wallets, right? And they can do it right there on the spot. And that cryptographically, that's only possible for someone who has the key, right? So there's this whole other world of audit procedures, audit benefits in transparency and public records, and you don't have to send a com firm out to a bank and all those kinds of things. And so that will be a very exciting space to watch in addition to artificial intelligence. But of course, underlying all of these different types of technologies, just the basic mathematics and analytics and communication that we continue to provide. I see more and more business intelligence platforms being produced that are powerful, intuitive, friendly, producing better information and better decision-making points for stakeholders along the way, which I'm thrilled to see accountants adopting more and more over time. And as a result of that, we up our analytics game, right? We up our statistics game. Some of us even up our programming game just a little bit, learn some Python here and there. So I'm thrilled to see all those different types of changes in our profession.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not tell you that, I did pick up a little bit of Python because I was curious to know what happens at the back end. How does this work? Because everybody said, if you want to know how AI works, start with Python because that's like the base. And I was like, okay, obviously I'm not that tech savvy. So after a while, I was like, okay, this is what it is. Something that I don't need to do.
That's right.
I'll just rely on ChatGPT and tell it, can you just get this done for me?
You can peek behind the curtain if you want to, if that's something that benefits you, right? And as we all continue deciding the areas where we want to learn and grow, it just makes it such a fascinating, wonderful profession and wonderful opportunity for us all to have to continue to grow and develop as professionals.
Absolutely. And during the beginning of the conversation, you shared with us your entire journey of how you grew. And that's why, I would want to lean on to you to ask that, what advice would you give to the accounting professionals who are aiming to upskill in AI and technology-driven auditing?
Yeah, so I personally have benefited quite a bit from my desire to continue learning, right? I find jobs and roles and clients and work interesting as long as I continue learning. And so I mentioned that I decided to learn Python, or I started an automation practice. In order to do that, I had to learn Python. I learned how to use different RPA platforms. I went back and studied analytics very, very heavily and studied statistics, the underlying theories, and then studied different types of machine learning methods and algorithms just to be able to conceptually understand those things. I would have to spend a whole career to try and develop an expertise in those. But conceptually, I was able to understand the concepts and the applications, and therefore be able to do these types of things. And so if you enjoy learning, and if you find these types of technologies interesting, wow, this is such an excellent time to make use of publicly available resources, of CPE platforms just like this one, of other types of courses in universities, of all the different types of resources that are available to you to continue investing in yourself, learning and developing and growing. And so that's the one biggest piece of advice that I would offer to people. Continue to invest in yourself to learn and grow. If that's something that inspires you and engenders passion in you, then you're certainly going to benefit from that over the long run. And so I would be happy to discuss any types of these ideas or questions or concepts with anybody who wants to. You can tell that I love speaking about accounting and technology. So you can always reach out to me and ask questions if you like. I'm thrilled with this type of discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rob, your insights today have been incredibly entertaining, okay, and very enlightening, okay? So before we conclude, any final reflections or key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, the one final sort of key takeaway I might say is the sky's the limit. So like we just said, if you continue learning, there's going to be a lot of opportunity. So given that that's the case, I would tell people, don't hold back your personal passion and whatever makes you excited about your work or our industry or our profession or your clients or your company or your team or your colleagues, whatever it is. We need your passion. We need what makes you unique. We need what makes you excited. So don't hold that back too much. I know that we all try and adapt to our corporate environments, and that's certainly appropriate. And we want to maintain professional decorum for our clients and for each other, of course, but still bring your personal bit of enthusiasm to your roles, because wow, we certainly need it in the profession. We certainly need it in our jobs, and we need it in our teams as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, for a fascinating conversation. To our listeners, we hope this episode has expanded your understanding of AI's revolutionary role in auditing. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, and stay tuned for more insightful discussions and topics shaping the future of various industries. Until next time, keep innovating and pushing boundaries. Cheers then.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE's Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.